Well, good evening, everybody. I am Dr. Ted Barnett, founder and president of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, and I'm so excited to welcome you to this event, which is co-sponsored with Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute and the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group. And I'm zooming in right now from my gazebo in Western New York, near just south of Rochester, New York. And that's why it's so nice and green here. And looks like we're starting to level off with attendees. Okay, excellent. So I am going to share my screen. So so tonight we are very excited to be able to present Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who will be talking about self-destructive eating and social pressure to eat dangerously. I love that title. And a little bit about our agenda for tonight. We'll spend about 5 minutes doing introductions. Then Dr. Fuhrman will give a presentation that will last about 50 minutes, and he has graciously agreed to stick around till about 8:15 to answer questions from the audience. So we're excited about that. So again, our topic tonight, self-destructive eating and the social pressure to eat dangerously. And let me just tell you about our lecturer. Dr. Joel Fuhrman is a board-certified family physician and 7-time New York Times best-selling author, also internationally recognized expert on nutrition and natural healing. He specializes in preventing and reversing disease through nutritional methods and coined the term nutritarian to describe a nutrient-dense eating style designed to prevent cancer, slow aging, and extend lifespan. Dr. Fuhrman is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and has received the St. Joseph Family Practice Residents Teaching Award for his contribution to the education of family practice residents and a C3 Cardiology Global Health Award for teaching nutritional science to cardiologists. Dr. Fuhrman operates the Eat to Live Retreat in San Diego, a residential facility that helps individuals recover from conditions ranging from cardiovascular disease to autoimmune disease, food addiction, and more. They also gain the skills and knowledge to make these changes permanent when they leave the retreat. A native of Yonkers, New York, Dr. Fuhrman is a former world-class figure skater who placed second in the U.S. National Paris Championships in 1973 and third in the 1976 World Professional Paris Skating Championship. Along with his nutritional expertise, Dr. Fuhrman has been involved professionally with sports medical committees, advising professional and Olympic athletes, and has lectured to athletic trainers and world-class athletes about maximizing performance and preventing injury. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Dr. Fuhrman, could you please turn on your video? And there you are. And welcome, Dr. Fuhrman. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here. Good to see all your friendly faces.
Well, it's really a treat. We were just talking about how you and I were at the Vegetarian Summerfest probably several decades ago, and it's a great place to meet people. That's a plug for Vegetarian Summerfest. Anyway, if you'd like to share your screen, that would be ideal, and we'll let you take it away.
Okay, welcome everybody. And as we said, I'm going to be speaking for about 50 minutes, and then we'll take questions. And we're talking here about that we know that people should eat healthier and should lose weight and be thinner, but they can't do it. And this lecture is about some information that will help people make the change and make it stick and understand the difficulties involved in changing your diet. In any case, I want to start with the basic principle of a nutritarian diet, the first principle, and I think it's the most proven methodology to slow aging and extend human lifespan. And I want you to write down or memorize these 5 words, because this first principle is the most important one. It's this: moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. Those 5 words, or moderate caloric restriction with micronutrient excellence. What I'm saying here, and is represented by this equation, I'm saying that your health, your future healthy life expectancy is dependent on your lifetime exposure to the nutritional bang per caloric buck of your diet. In other words, how much nutrients you get per calorie, whether you're eating foods that have no nutrients in them and just eating empty calories, or whether you're eating foods that contain antioxidants and phytochemicals and fiber and other beneficial nutrients. And I'm saying that we're dividing food into 3 categories. One category is produce, and the other category are animal products and processed foods. And many of you are aware that those 2 categories, both animal products and processed foods, do not contain a significant micronutrient load. They're rich in macronutrients or calories. They're rich in fat, carbohydrate, and protein, but they don't contain a significant number of phytochemicals, particularly phytochemicals and antioxidants, which the body needs to support normal immune function, protect against cancer, aging of the brain, and heart disease as well. So we can say that we have an antioxidant phytochemical deficiency diseases that kill people because we don't eat sufficient colorful plants. And plants are naturally have a lower caloric density, but they have a lower caloric density, but they're richer, of course, in nutrients. And that's what you're learning here on this presentation, is this nutritional richness enables us to control our appetite. And we eat foods that do not contain nutrients, especially foods that go into the bloodstream rapidly, then it changes the brain structure and function, creates neural inflammation in the brain, and leads to an overwhelming desire to increase our caloric intake over and above our energy requirements. So what I'm saying here, I'm giving you the problem, but also the solution. So we know that fat on the body is abnormal. There's no early humans that had that with obesity, and there's no animals with this degree of fat on their body. And animal fat makes you insulin resistant. Let me say that one more time. Body fat makes you insulin resistant, so you have to produce higher levels of insulin from the beta cells in the pancreas to keep the glucose controlled. So we have higher insulin and higher glucose as a result of increased body fat. But body fat also is pro-inflammatory tissue because it doesn't get a great blood supply. It's somewhat under-oxygenated. So it produces more free radicals, more toxins. It spews out lipokines and cytokines, suppresses immunity, increases risk of infection, increases risk of cancer, and of course activates the aromatase production of estrogen, thus increasing risk of breast cancer and prostate cancer as well. So most Americans are overweight today. I estimate it's about 80, if you use the BMI of 23 as the demarcation line between normal weight and overweight, it's about 90% of Americans are overweight. The health authorities tell us that 70% of Americans are overweight because they use the BMI of 25 as the demarcation line. But all long-lived individuals and societies have BMIs below 23. So if we use that, it's more realistic. Even that's generous because the most lifespan enhancing BMIs are below 22 for a male and below 21 for a female. So even if we permissively allow 23 to be the demarcation line, then we classify about 89% of the population as overweight. Looking at that 11% that's not with a BMI below 23, the majority of those are not healthy eaters. The majority of those are cigarette smokers, alcoholics, and people with occult cancers and digestive disorders and autoimmune conditions and other diseases keeping them thin. It's only 2.4% of Americans that have a BMI below 23 who earn that because they eat healthfully and exercise regularly. So it's rare. So it's a very strong minority of people that are healthy eaters with a normal weight. What's interesting is that studies on a woman in 2020 eating the same amount of calories and the same amount of exercise as one 50 years ago in 1970 is still 30 pounds heavier with the same amount of calories. We think it's due to all these xenobiotic toxins and endocrine disruptors that swell your body up as well. So not only are we eating excess calories, but we're eating a diet with more exogenous wastes or xenobiotic waste products. So I'm saying here that ideally, as your body fat shouldn't be above 15% for a male and above 25% for a female, but as body fat goes up, you see more insulin resistance, more estrogen production, more pro-inflammatory compounds, and more acceleration of the aging process, and increasing of the metabolic rate as we consume more calories, which then you could say expires or utilizes or burns out our stem cells, our telomeres, and we age much more rapidly. So what this presentation is about, it has to do with, well, why are people eating so much food, and why can't they control the amount of food they require? Why aren't they eating to meet their energy needs? You'd think these neuropeptides and neurohormones like ghrelin and leptin and all these factors that control your appetite would be able to set your appetite and have you desire the right amount of calories. And I'm saying the problem is we discombobulate and destroy these neuropeptides and the ability of the body to regulate calories when we eat fast food. And what I'm saying fast food is not just the food in a fast food restaurant. It's food that enters the bloodstream rapidly. And this graph people know because they've seen it on graphs describing what the word glycemic load means. In other words, how fast glucose enters the bloodstream after you eat a high glycemic carbohydrate, like white bread or white rice. Compared to, let's say, a bean or peas, which the calories enter the bloodstream more slowly, white rice or white bread or sugar or honey or maple syrup will enter the bloodstream very, very quickly, leading to a higher caloric concentration in the bloodstream. Now, keep in mind that I'm using that term nutritarian to be this diet style that I'm recommending, rich in natural plant foods, that gets its fat from nuts and seeds and avocados, not from oils or animal fats. A more conventional diet gets their fat intake from animal fats and oils, and even many plant-based or vegan diets can still use oil on their diet and still be plant-based. But a nutritarian diet is avoiding those fats for numerous reasons. The reason is because both animal fats and oils, you can get a huge amount of calories entering the blood rapidly. They say from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat, because oil goes right into the bloodstream and store on your fat supply within minutes. So what I'm saying here is that it's hard to get a lot of calories in the blood all at one time. If we lived in an environment of 30 or 50,000 years ago, and don't forget, humans have only been utilizing oil for about 4,000 years, which is just a mere grain on the full sand of on the beach of human existence. Nobody ever used oil. No human species or primitive humans or early humans ever extracted oil from food to pour on our food. It's a highly concentrated calorie. And when we take that highly concentrated calorie, we can put a huge amount of calories in the blood. Go out in the jungle or the woods and see how much calories you can put into the blood. You can't get more than like 100 calories in the blood at one time, because when you're eating peas and beans and roots and shoots and tubers, they're so full of resistant starch and fiber and slowly digestible carbohydrates that those calories enter the bloodstream over a 2 to 4 hour period. So you get a few calories a minute coming into the bloodstream, not 50 calories a minute coming into the bloodstream. So the examples I'm giving here of fast foods are oil and white flour. And I'm saying white flour is a sugar equivalent. It's the same as if you were eating a cube of sugar with a spoon, or just take sugar out of a sugar dish, sugar bowl or something. It's the same as eating white flour, because the white flour turns into sugar as it entering the bloodstream, the digestive tract entering the bloodstream. The body doesn't differentiate the two, and there's no significant amount of fiber or nutrients that are associated with those calories. And when the body converts the energy from glucose into energy for the body, it requires cofactors, both vitamins and minerals, and also it produces free radicals that have to be diffused. So when you take in flour with no micronutrient load that was associated with it as it would in a natural food, like a berry or a bean, then the body can't effectively convert it into energy. It more efficiently stores it as fat. And when it does, leaving you fatigued, even though you're taking a lot of calories, and when you do convert it into energy, you do so with a tremendous expense at stripping the body of nutrients and creating more metabolic toxins like free radicals that are not mitigated by the free radicals and antioxidants in the food. So I'm saying here is that fast food includes foods that can be accessed rapidly in a bag or a box. You can eat them rapidly, you can digest them rapidly, and you can put a lot of calories into the bloodstream. And this amount of highly concentration of calories in the bloodstream all at once is not normal in nature, and it disrupts natural neuropeptides. It disrupts our normal appetite regulation. So these calorically dense food have a potent effect on stimulating dopamine, and over time, making us dopamine insensitive. And I'm not claiming that dopamine is the only factor here. There's a lot of chemical neuropeptides involved, and it's quite complicated in the interactions between the digestive tract, the hypothalamus, and the cerebral brain, and all the control of these signals that go back and forth. But we get a conditioned response to this high caloric load so that we no longer feel normal unless we duplicate or replicate a high caloric load. And over time, you don't feel satisfied and you're not getting adequate dopamine response in response to a normal caloric load, you need this very powerful amount of calories into the bloodstream to satisfy yourself, which results in obviously a conditioned learning response, which leads to both impulsive and compulsive desire to eat excessively and to have excess food and caloric intake. So we're saying here, this impulse response is that not only are you enjoying eating a lot of food, but you're also thinking about food a lot and thinking about paying a price to going and waiting and getting and achieving a lot of these heavy foods. So that means the smell of food, the thought of food, not just the taste of food, but the seeing it, feeling it, thinking about it, and smelling it could excite these neurological pathways that make you want to go after our higher caloric intake, and you're not satisfied. Like an apple or some peas out of a pod from the garden wouldn't satisfy you because it's not going to give you enough caloric density. You got to go for something that's going to give you more of a hit. So I'm saying right now, it's almost like the culmination of what you're learning today. You have, in order for a person to desire less calories and stay with a diet, they have to restore abnormal brain circuitry. They destroyed their brain. And the only way you can restore the brain is to eat foods with a lower caloric flux, which means that whose calories don't enter the bloodstream so rapidly. So you keep the calories in the bloodstream at a lower level chronically, months even, months. So the brain loses its dependency on being overly stimulated. So I'm saying here that sugar and flour are not food. They act on the brain as a drug. Make no doubt about it. When people are eating, croissants and bagels and cookies and pizza and burgers and things, there is a drug-like effect on the brain, because we're calling food as something that sustains life, and these foods give us energy without the nutrients that sustain life. So it's tricking our body and our brain. And I'm saying sugar and flour, S/F, sugar flour, is an anti-nutrient, sucking nutrients out of the body, like salt does, by the way. Salt's an anti-nutrient too, because when we take an excess salt, the body has to remove it in the urine and in the sweat. When we have normal amounts of sodium present in natural foods, we're not sweating out salt and urinating out much salt. The body can't selectively just take salt out of the body with the excess. It takes other minerals out of the body with it in its effort to get rid of all that excess salt. And in doing so, we lose minerals in the process, and we could get cramping, of course, from exercise now because our sweat has so much sodium and other minerals in it. But the point is that salt is also an appetite stimulant and also is disruptive to the appetite regulating neurotransmitters. And it's also a pro-inflammatory substance in excess that can inflame the endothelial lining of blood vessels and have a lot of different other mechanisms via which it increases risk of stroke and even heart attack outside of its effect on raising blood pressure. So we're talking here on sweetening, sugar, oil, and salt, or SOS, sugar, oil, and salt, being particularly accelerating obesity and disease. And of course, we're saying that nutritional starvation from eating these low nutrient foods, and I'm referring to oil and sugar, honey, maple syrup, and white flour, leads to nutritional starvation that builds up metabolic toxins in the body. And you have more exogenous waste, more endogenous waste, and exogenous waste, and the inability to reduce those wastes. In other words, the endogenous wastes are waste the body produces: lipofuscin, free radicals, ammonia, other reactive oxygen species, advanced glycation end products. The body produces these byproducts of metabolism called endogenous, which means produced by the body itself. But then we're also exposed to exogenous wastes, including inhaling smoke or eating pesticides or chemicals or eating seafood that has toxins, or having, whatever it is we have. You guys might not be aware, but there's a tremendous exposure to or increase in the amount of toxins in seafood, particularly in bivalves and shellfish, that are now being exposed to the runoff from commercial farms that produce more algae bloom and more cyanobacteria, leading to more BMAA and a high degree of the Parkinson dementia syndrome, and even ALS, and linked to people living around lakes and bays and oceans where they're eating more seafood, shellfish, and bivalves. Bivalves are clams, oysters, scallops, and mussels. But look, I'm saying right now, our body is under attack from external toxins and internal generated toxins. And these buildup of these toxins lead to overeating behavior. And other mechanisms via which we overeat is because our body becomes more toxic. So I'm saying here that when we eat more foods without nutrients in them, more like bread and pasta and bagels, then, and even, processed vegan food, right? Then you build up more intermyocellular lipids of fat around the muscle tissue. It leads to muscle weakness, which then makes you, and because it's not efficiently generating enough energy, your muscles are weakened and you feel lethargic. If you don't feel like doing much, it makes you more like thinking of being a couch potato. You don't feel like jogging, running, playing games, moving, climbing trees. You don't feel like doing things. You feel like just hanging out on the couch. So you have impaired energy production and you feel more generally fatigued when you're eating more processed foods. And I'm also saying that a piece of chicken is like a bagel, because both the chicken and the bagel are not sources of antioxidants and phytochemicals. The bagel is rich in carbohydrate, but we get it without a significant micronutrient load. And the chicken might be rich in protein, but we get that without a significant micronutrient load. When we keep our micronutrients so low, we build up more metabolic toxins and we lose the ability to remove the xenobiotic toxins and the exogenous toxins that can create disease as well. So just to review a little bit here, I'm saying glycemically unfavorable diets, as well as diets high in animal products too, but here we're looking at glycemic unfavorable diets due to eating white rice, white flour, sugar, honey, maple syrup, and even white potato. Too much of these low nutrient foods and high glycemic carbohydrates are linked to breast cancer and prostate cancer. The meta-analysis of almost 40 studies here show increased risk of most common cancers as the glycemic load of the diet increases. And white rice, for example, is a good example, as bigger servings of white rice lead to increasing cancer rates, and especially breast cancer. And of course, I'm saying here that gut inflammation means brain inflammation. They're very connected. And when you eat this diet of sweets and meats, and I'm saying white flour is a sweet, right? White flour is sweet, it's sugar. It leads to more pathogenic bacteria in the gut, and you have more dangerous inflammatory compounds being created by the unfavorable bacteria, and you have more inflammation in the body, and it gives you more of this, what I'm going to call toxicosis, driving overeating behavior. So sugar eating, which is white flour eating, doesn't only increase insulin like animal protein does, it also increases IGF-1, and it's a powerful, and you may know insulin is a powerful growth hormone and fat storage hormone that in higher levels, when you have this glucose and insulin spiking together, it suppresses immune system function. So you don't have immune system surveillance, and you take away the ability to genes silence abnormal genes, allowing cancer to replicate. And now you have also stopping the ability of the immune system to recognize abnormal cell surfaces, which mark abnormal cells, where the immune system could have had the ability to remove those cells before they create damage, but now these cells can replicate and create damage. So unhealthy eating shuts down the immune system and shuts down both immune surveillance and gene silencing. So, and the brain is under attack. This episodically high glucose damages brain cells. Diabetics have more, get dementia earlier and more severe. And it's not just associated with poor school performance and lower intelligence, but but as you increase your body fat, as you get heavier, you decrease executive function, which means your cerebral brain, the real you, who you are, is no longer in control of your behavior. The primitive brain becomes more in control, and you become more vulnerable to the drives of your addictions. So I'm saying here that there's clearly no such thing as a healthy overweight person. You can't mix being overweight and being healthy. That's a misnomer. You're unhealthy in proportion that you have extra fat on your body. And we're striving to eat the right diet, both the right food and the right amount of food to be healthy and live a long lifespan. And we have this unprecedented opportunity to live really long if we do the right thing. And oils, when they're cooked, they're not just fattening and not just create desire to eat more calories. They also degrade under heat and create toxic compounds that are carcinogenic. Even the Sydney Diet Heart Study showed cooked vegetable oils were more dangerous than red meat. So we build up these toxic metabolites. And the reason why I'm mentioning these toxic metabolites that build up, and we're talking here about these, for example, are endogenous wastes. They're just the product of eating unhealthfully, but not the pesticides and the chemicals and the poisons from the external world. Those are called xenobiotics, which can also lead to immune system dysfunction, autoimmune conditions, hypersensitivity and inflammation, and they can cause, even, let's say the COVID vaccine can cause myocarditis, pericarditis. In other words, we take medicines, we take vaccines, we put poisonous substances into our body, we put pesticides and chemicals and other things in our body, and we pay a price for them. And the worse your nutrition, though, and the buildup of more other wastes, the more these wastes can create damage and lead to chronic medical conditions. So fast food is highly addicting. It's digested and absorbed rapidly. And I'm saying fast food is not only food bought in a fast food restaurant. It's things you get in a supermarket, in a bag or a box, right? Or even a can. But it's digested or a bottle. It's digested and absorbed rapidly because oil is a fast food. It has synthetic ingredients usually and calorically dense, nutritionally barren, highly flavored, usually high in sugar and salt. And these things are highly addicting. And so the brain's under attack. It's brain damaging. The standard American diet is a brain damaging diet. And we used to be 1 in 500 Americans used to be mentally ill. And now it's 1 in 5 Americans are mentally ill. And even two servings a week of commercial baked goods and fast foods doubles the lifetime risk of depression. And you know that people aren't eating 2 servings a week. They're eating 15, 20 servings a week. I don't know what they're eating. So what I'm saying right now is that almost the whole population becomes universally dysthymic. The word dysthymic means they're not passionate and excited about living. They have a cloud over their life, a health cloud that gives them a brain fog, and they live to meet their addictive needs. So they'll work through it. They'll not so sick they can't go to work, but they won't really love their work. They're just working to make money so they can spend it in restaurants, in bars, on drugs, or to use food as a drug. The number one, drug people use is using food as a drug. And they live for their drug addiction. They live for their food addiction. And living for that alters brain structure. It creates chronic inflammation. And the chronic inflammation, of course, leads to decreased neuroplasticity, which means reduces your creativity. And chronic inflammation means that you're just responding for immediate gratification, like an animal. You no longer have the cerebral function of a human that can postpone gratification till they do what's best for the long term, your own long-term benefit. So people lose the ability to behave in a manner that benefits themselves long-term. They'll hurt themselves long-term to benefit themselves short-term, like other animals will do if they get too much inflammation with these toxic and drug-like substances. So these foods, so the American diet and fast food eating and commercial baked goods could work on the brain, much like opiates and narcotics and nicotine work on the brain of other types, people with addicts. And of course, we know that candy and fast food and commercial baked goods are also linked to violence and aggression and delusional thinking. And even in the highest quintile of candy consumption in this European study, those children fed the most candy were 60% likely to be arrested for a violent crime or a drug-related offense by the time they were 35 years old. And no other variable, not even being raised in an orphanage or having abusive parents, was so correlated with drug abuse as was a poor diet. So I'm saying you got to be insane to eat fast food, and it makes you insane practically. This is one of the slides from my book, Fast Food Genocide. I wrote that book with about 12 different cartoons. I made up the cartoons in my head, but I didn't draw them. I hired an artist to draw them, so I got a kick out of that. So this is an important principle here, is that when we're digesting food, that's called the anabolic phase of the digestive cycle. We're digesting, we're eating and digesting. And digesting could take place hours after you finish eating the meal. And when you stop digesting, you're finished eating, then you've stored all the glycogen and all the food is stored in your body. And now we can live and burn down that gasoline that we just filled the body up with, right? And that's called the catabolic phase, when we burn off what we stored in the anabolic phase. And what I'm saying here is that in the catabolic phase, when you're not digesting food, the liver, the kidney, and the body in general can enhance healing, detoxification, removal of metabolic wastes and exogenous wastes, and attempt to age slower. I always say the longer we live in the catabolic phase, the longer we live. That's why eating dinner earlier and not eating late at night and not gorging and eating a huge dinner, but eating a lighter, earlier dinner. So let's say we finish dinner by 6 o'clock. So we can go to bed at 10 o'clock and have an empty stomach. So one of my tips here that I want you to remember is that trying to finish eating for the day early and not eating so much food at night that you feel full or stuffed, so you're still feeling like digestion's going when you go to sleep, is the secret tip to extend human longevity, is to finish eating dinner earlier and lighter. So when you go to sleep at night, you're going to sleep on an empty stomach. Because most healing and even weight loss takes place during sleep. And most repair of the bodies and removing reactive oxygen species from the brain takes place during sleep. And the ability of the body to, the anti-aging self-repair mechanisms are enhanced during sleep if we're not simultaneously digesting food, because the liver and kidney is actively involved with the detox process, which it can't take that strong involvement when it's busy processing and storing glycogen and doing everything dealing with the meal. So we're saying here that if we look at the digestive cycle here, that after you eat a meal, notice the glucose curve goes up, and it still starts to go down because you're absorbing food in the digestive tract, but you're not still eating at that point. But when you finish digesting, then you enter that catabolic phase, and that's when detox or repair is enhanced, when digestion is over. But most people's body are so toxic from eating poor foods, eating poor, not healthy enough foods, and not foods that have enough nutrient density, that when they enter that catabolic phase, they start to feel shaky and weak and fatigued. And they think weakness and fatigue and brain fog and stomach cramping and headache and throat, they feel that these things are hunger, and they're not the symptoms of hunger. They're the symptoms of, I call toxic hunger, because the body is toxic. And toxic hunger drives overeating behavior, because people don't tolerate not digesting food, because they feel too ill if they don't keep their body digesting food all the time. They have no disconnection with their energy requirements. They're eating to prevent detox, just like a smoker has to take another smoke to prevent the shakes and the agitation from the nicotine going down, or the addict needs another shot of heroin, or or you need another cup of coffee because you're getting coffee withdrawal headaches. All these things are putting poisons into the body to stop detoxification and keeping the body busy to let it tolerate and accept a higher level of waste products. When we start to eat healthy and remove toxic waste, smoking, caffeine, too much animal protein, all these factors that increase the metabolic waste in the body and other exogenous waste, then when we no longer eat food and we're in a catabolic phase, we feel nothing. The body survives and thrives on burning down the glycogen that was stored in the anabolic phase. So we're not hungry at all until we start to wean down that glycogen. And don't forget, you're not even going to lose weight unless you burn through 2/3 of your glycogen. Your body's not burning fat for energy. It preferably burns glycogen for energy. Then if you continue not to eat, of course, your body, with the brain, which can only function on glucose in a non-emergency state, the brain, if you continue not to eat, because the brain utilizes 80% of our energy needs it, we're at rest, and the brain is fueled by glucose. So it will start to break down muscle tissue to make glucose, because the body has the ability to convert amino acids into muscle tissue. But do you think the body wants to waste muscle tissue to fuel the brain? Of course not. It signals us to eat with real hunger before we start breaking down muscle tissue. So hunger becomes a precise computer that connects us with the exact amount of calories to maintain our muscle mass and our size and maintain our fitness and healthy tissue. Hunger doesn't exist to put fat on the body. Hunger is just to protect lean tissue. The point I'm making is, if you gained weight and you became fat, then you had to have eaten outside of the demands of true hunger, right? You had to have eaten when you either emotional eating, recreational eating, or addictive eating. And obviously, the modern food environment is a toxic food environment of highly seasoned, highly palatable foods that leads people into emotional and recreational eating. So I'm saying here, most people, because their diets are toxic and their bodies are toxic, they have to go from one anabolic phase to another anabolic phase without adequate time, with no with not entering the catabolic phase. So what, you know what they can do, because they can't tolerate entering the catabolic phase, it's too uncomfortable. They start to feel shaky and anxiety, or they start to feel too wiped out if they don't constantly keep food in the body. They can eat animal products and fried foods. They can eat like burgers and fries and cheese and melt cheese on it, or eat steaks. And they can eat like a lot of animal products and greasy foods because they take so long to digest that they can stay digesting in the anabolic phase for 5 hours until it's time to eat again. So they can prevent them from never entering a catabolic phase. Of course, then they're going to age prematurely, but so I'm saying what many people feel like is hunger that's driving them to eat calories is not hunger. They're toxic hunger. Real hunger is not headaches, weakness, and fatigue, right? Real hunger is felt right here in the lower portion of your neck and the higher portion of your chest, right about here. And it's a drawing sensation. It's not what thirst. Thirst is felt higher up. Hunger is felt a little lower down. And it's accompanied by enhancements in taste sensation. So I'm saying here, so hunger actually makes food taste better. So a person comes to my office and say, hey, Joel, I got this delicious soup I made for you to try. It's so delicious. You should try this soup. And I'll say to them, well, great, let me have it, but I'll put it in the refrigerator and I'll eat it later when I'm hungry, because I'll really enjoy it more later. I'm not going to enjoy it right now. I just ate 2 hours ago. I'm not hungry right now. You always say hunger is the best sauce because there's no desire to eat food when there's no energy requirement. And plus, because the energy requirements run parallel to and marry with taste function and taste ability. So when you wait till you really need the energy, then your taste buds are heightened and the food tastes better. There's no desire to eat food if you don't need the calories. It's only an unhealthy diet and continually imbibing and utilizing high caloric food and overeating calories that make you addicted to, and has your primitive brain be the driver of behavior instead of the cerebral brain. Because why are people behaving in ways that are contraindicated to their long-term health? Why aren't you your best friend or your person that loves yourself the most to protect your future health? Why would you behave in self-destructive eating behaviors? So diets don't work because people don't get rid of toxic hunger because they're trying to portion control. By the way, only 3 out of 100, in studies on this, only 3 out of 100 people on diets lose weight. And because they're mostly portion control diets. I'm saying the reason why these diets fail is because they're not seeking volume, fiber, and nutrients. They have to do that long term to change the brain's dependency on concentrated calories. And animal protein, sugar, and caffeine feed toxic hunger because they build up waste products and make you feel buzzed if you don't keep your body digesting food all the time. So this is a study we published in 2010 called The Changing Perceptions of Hunger on a High Nutrient Density Diet, where we showed people's perception, the change of hunger from feeling it was their stomach and their head and feeling fatigue. Those were the 3 most common symptoms of fatigue and a feeling of buzz in the head or stomach cramping. And we've demonstrated that 6 months after people changed their diet to a healthy diet, that 90% of these people had a changed perception of hunger, and they lost their addictive drive to overeat from the quality of how healthy their diet was. The higher the dietary quality score and the amount of phytochemicals and colorful vegetables and green vegetables consumed, the more they were satisfied with lower amounts of calories. So we're saying that addiction has a dark face. It leads to an unhappy life and loss of control of your own life. I could say you lose the keys to the bank. In other words, you're no longer in control of your own life. Your addiction is driving life. It leads to cravings. You feel withdrawal or sickly all the time when you try to eat less food. You feel brain fog. You weakened your taste buds by eating foods that are highly flavored and seasoned. You're unsatisfied all the time unless you're overfed to a pathological degree, and you're emotionally dependent on dangerous food. And addicts behave and think irrationally, and they can be destructive to themselves and others. In other words, when you're a heroin addict, you can, steal, cheat, lie, anything just to get your fix. And when you're a food addict, it can make you less compassionate, less feeling and caring for other people, and more involved with the own narrow world that you have around you. You're more narcissistically involved with meeting your need for addictive substances, and less creatively involved with goodwill for the outside world, because your addictive drives are taking over a major controller in your life. And we're seeing this. We're seeing that in the political system today, right? We see this where people believe in conspiracy theories and delusional ideas, and they're led down the wrong path towards racism and violence, and we're seeing all types of things happening. And we saw this in human history. We saw it after the Civil War with the growth of pellagra from niacin deficiency, and for the southern whites eating so much corn, molasses, sugar, and pork that they developed pellagra, which developed a rash and of course homicidal, suicidal, aggressive, leading to lynchings and violence. And we're talking here about the initial term rednecks. Redneck is because come from the pellagra, which wasn't until after the 1900s when a medical doctor, first the medical profession denied this was a disease. They thought it was a genetic deficiency and genetic weakness. They didn't consider it a nutritional problem. It wasn't until around 1915, I think, when they finally realized that people could get out of prison feeding them vegetables and having them grow, they wouldn't go back and have less recidivism and less chance of being arrested for violent crimes again if they were eating healthy. But we're seeing this today all over again, that poor eating leads to violence, aggression, anger, and depressed mood and emotional lability. So the abuse of food is similar to the abuse of drugs, alcohol and drugs. And we have a nation of food addicts, people eating larger amounts than they anticipated. Are you a food addict? Do you unable to cut back on your food intake? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about food, or are you thinking about the creativity and passion you have for living your life? Do you experience cravings to eat or drink? That's not normal. Does your overeating interfere with your health, your work, your home life? Are you continuing to eat foods that you know are damaging to your health? Because why would you be self-destructive? And so the question is, this is really, may not be you, but it's many people in our country today and around the modern world. And the addictive drives have a life of their own. They don't want to die. The subconscious mind hates change. It creates anxiety to think people they have to change the way they eat. But the only way to get rid of addictive food behavior is by changing what you're eating, because you can't change the amount you eat unless you change the quality of what you're eating, because you have to lower the caloric density long-term that the brain sees in order to stop the enhanced cravings and the disconnection between your energy needs and your appetite, right? So emotional eating doesn't help you. It doesn't make people say, oh, I'm all stressed out. If you had the stress that I have in my life, you'd overeat too. But see, that's the primitive brain talking. Everybody hearing information like this may say, oh, it sounds good. It's, sounds scientific, but it's not for me. I can't change the way I eat. I got to, it's for somebody else. My work's my too stressful. I'm traveling. My family wouldn't eat this way. See, the addict always has an excuse, right? There's always an excuse, because the addictive mind is always going to think of a reason why they can't stop their addiction, right? But there's no excuse that makes sense. There's no excuse that under rational scrutiny can't be solved and is reasonable. They're all unreasonable. So overeating is positioning this. It's also an ethical dilemma. Now, just think about this for a minute, because what about if you're getting your self-esteem from the approval of other people, and you're looking for people to approve of you? And we're raised that way in our country, right? We're raised that way in our society. We want to look the best. We want to have the best job, make the most money, be in the best sports team in school, get in the best college, whatever. We're trying to impress other people, put our pictures on Instagram and whatever, we put them on Facebook, whatever. We're trying to get as much approval, or we want our families to approve of us. And I'm saying that this preoccupation with approval is somewhat like eating junk food, because it leads to failure where people can't eat healthfully. Because most Americans are not eating healthfully. And when you choose to make this radical change to a diet with lots of fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds and berries, and when you try to eat differently than other people, you're not going to get their approval. You're going to get their disapproval, because you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. So now we're telling you to eat in a manner that's going to get the disapproval of your peers and your comrades and your workers. And when we studied this, because we used to work with Whole Foods Market or their employees, who were the highest utilizers of healthcare costs, and we lectured to them for a week in a hotel and got them excited and passionate about eating healthfully. But we found that, 80% of them didn't stay with the program. And we tried to research why they didn't stay eating healthfully with all these tremendous benefits they would have gotten, including monetary benefits, by the way. We were even paying them rewards for staying with the program. And we found the main reason was peer pressure, because poor self-esteem makes being different from other people more difficult. and they still they felt like they had to fit in more, and they weren't trained to be a leader. So I'm saying here that sometimes to change your weight permanently, you have to change your way you think, and you have to learn about how to become a leader and how to have go after self-esteem in a different manner. So we're talking here, is your self-esteem self-generated, or is it externally generated from other people? Self-generated self-esteem comes from your ability to have creative goodwill for other people. And it doesn't put the self first, but you feel better about yourself in a deep way that's sustained and more, you could say, puts you at peace, where you don't need other people's approval, when you feel like you're doing things that are useful to the humanity world around you and other people. So if I said to you, if somebody said to you, oh, if I had to eat that way, I'd rather be shot. I'd just rather die right now, because who wants to live on carrot sticks the rest of my life? So the question is, how are you going to respond? Are you going to be irritated and try to protect your own ego and try to respond in a way to show them that you know more than they do? Or what's your motivation for saying something? And I'm saying that if you can learn to be motivated by, well, how can I show this person that I care about them? And how can I show this person that I have love for them? And how can I show this person that I'm going to have creative goodwill for them? And this creative goodwill isn't about making yourself look good. It's about, and it's not dependent on whether you're successful in converting them to take better care of their health. It's the attempt that you made and the value of that attempt. And if it only worked 1 in 100 times, it's the value of that attempt that gives you self-satisfaction and builds your self-esteem. So you don't need their approval. You just need to feel good about your purpose. So I'm saying this requires mindfulness and self-reflection and ongoing learning and growth, which puts us at more peace with ourselves. And when we have more peaceful with ourselves and our motives, and our interactions with others, then it makes it easier to follow a healthy diet, because then it gives us more power to have a more powerful effect on making other people, to having goodwill and a good effect on them. The more powerful we become and better examples of good health, and we develop wisdom and creativity in helping other people, the happier we can be and the more powerful we can be at affecting change for the better for others. So you have to be a leader to a degree so your diet doesn't fail. Because diets fail not just because of nutritional adequacy, they also fail because of emotional inadequacy. So you need to have nutritional adequacy. You need to have sufficient green vegetables in your diet, because green vegetables have the highest nutrient density, and our immune system is dependent on the exposure to green vegetables. I'm always saying that if you don't like green vegetables, you better live close to a hospital, because you're not going to have good health. And we have to avoid the use of concentrated oils, flours, and sweeteners. And we have to have low susceptibility to peer pressure if we're going to eat differently than other people. And we have to have self-generated self-esteem, not peer-generated self-esteem. And then we need a period of abstinence from brain-stimulating substances. We have to get off the caffeine, get off the animal protein, get off the sugars, the salts, the oils, the fried foods, the junk food. And sometimes people need a period with their family and they have supportive environment, and we all staying away from this stuff and watching each other, when they need a period a time where they're going to be away from that food to have the brain get back to normal again. And the brain can get back to normal, and as your health gets back to normal. So I'm talking here about adding mindfulness to this nutritional equation. So you pause and think before you act. Step back and consider the consequences of what you're going to say. You don't have to react to negative input or insult to protect your ego. That's not going to be something that's going to sustain you, like eating. That's not like eating broccoli. That's like eating a croissant. So if you think adequately about everything that goes into your mouth, and you want to eat in your best interest for your future and your best health, and that's what loving and caring for yourself is. It's always behaving in a way and eating in a way that means eating the best foods, the healthiest foods, and acting and behaving in a manner that's protective of your emotional health and your own, and marrying that. Your emotional health is married to your care and ability to feel, care, and love others. So your ability to care for and have feeling for others, is your emotional health is dependent on that. And good nutrition, good health, and a good attitude and trying to care for others builds that muscle. You build your taste muscle. you reduce your drive to overeat calories, and you increase your caring muscle in its application. And then you're not vulnerable to peer pressure or need to impress other people or need their approval in any way. You're okay to be different because you have self-generated self-esteem. So a nutritarian diet is a vegetable-based diet. It's not just plant-based, because a macrobiotic diet or a rice-based diet could be plant-based, or a fruit-based diet could be plant-based, or, we're talking here about a vegetable-based diet with, of course, a lot of variety of different types of plants in your diet, like fruits and beans and seeds and nuts, and no oils, because oils are obviously a substance that drives weight gain and overeating behavior. Because don't forget, when you get your fat from nuts and seeds, those calories are absorbed very slowly at a rate at which they can be preferentially burned for energy, not stored as fat. And in doing so, they have tremendous effects on satiety. You don't feel like eating for hours. The secret here is having a little bean and nuts and seeds and greens with the meal, which then keeps you satisfied with lower calories, because the calories are continually absorbed over a long period of time without consuming animal products for the prolonged exposure to calories. So it makes you not feeling like snacking. You don't want to eat as many calories. So a nutritarian diet, of course, is focusing on foods that we want people to eat that benefit their health. It focuses on nutrient-dense calories. So you have to repeat, in order to have this be at one with the way you prefer to eat, you have to repeat this and do it when you don't prefer to eat this way. Because at the beginning, you're not going to prefer to feel weak and fatigued, because if you're unhealthy and you start to eat healthfully, you don't feel better. You feel worse for the first week. You feel more fatigued and more uncomfortable and more headache as your body goes into a heightened detox mode. But it's repeating the correct habits over and over again that enable to translate this into long-term behaviors. But you have to realize it takes a few months of repeating correct habits. That's why we keep the diet so simplified, so people have that skeleton of what to eat at every meal. And there's no confusion. They don't have to deviate and focus on what they know exactly what they eat. They eat some fruit with some grain and some ground seeds for breakfast and some plant milk, right? They're having like some oats or quinoa or amaranth or teff with fruits, and one or two tablespoons of ground flax seeds or chia seeds or hemp seeds with plant milk on top, like unsweetened soy milk or walnut hemp milk, or we make homemade, plant milks by mixing 6 cups of water to 1 cup of seed, or 7 cups of water to 1 cup of seed with 1 date or something. And then lunch is a large salad, because raw vegetables are so key to human longevity. Repeat after me. I think this is 10 or 12 words. Raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with the reduction of cancers of all types. Let's say that one more time. Raw vegetables, more than 200 studies show this, that raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with reduction of cancers of all types. So having a big salad every day, at least once a day, is important. So we usually have a big salad for lunch with a dressing made with nuts and seeds, not made with oil. And then, maybe a bowl of vegetable bean soup and fruit for dessert. So we're training people to be consistent in their dietary skeleton. Fruit and grain for breakfast, salad and vegetable bean soup for lunch, and dinner, raw vegetables with a dip, different raw vegetables than you ate for lunch, maybe jicama and raw peppers and tomatoes and cauliflower or whatever it is you're in, snow pea pods and bok choy stems with maybe a salsa dip or a guacamole dip or a tahini dip, maybe with some kind of dressing or a healthy dip, and then cooked greens, mushrooms, and onions with beans or intact whole grain or a starchy vegetable, and a dessert, a fruit-based dessert at night. So the diet is very easy to understand and repeat with, because you're doing the same thing. You're changing the dressings, you're changing the vegetables, you're changing the things you're eating, but you're really trying to repeat. It's like learning the right tennis swing over and over again, repeat the right motion over and over again. And I'm saying that the dessert is important. Like having a little dessert, because you want to have dessert at night before you got full. So you have your plate of food and you have your dessert. So it means that you're going to stop eating after the dessert. And it's going to be just a regular portion, not big, like a half a cup of food. And the dessert is used to make you prevent overeating, because it marks the end of eating for the day. You finished eating early. You increased your satisfaction with a lighter dinner because you had a little frozen, banana ice cream or something, or frozen mango with coconut flakes or walnuts, or a little squeeze of lemon. You have a little mango sorbet, or anyway, whatever you're going to, this little dessert, or some just frozen fruit that you have, like frozen cherries, make a great dessert, partially defrosted. Take it out at the beginning of the meal. And then you clean the kitchen, you shut down the restaurant. I wrote the, I didn't spell down there, right? And you brush your teeth and you water pick and you get out of the kitchen, put the food away and you stay away from the kitchen and you enjoy the rest of your night with non-food activities, right? And for people having trouble with losing weight, they can eat, they don't have to eat thimble-sized portions of food. They can eat large portions of food, right? Like these foods are all so low in calories. And you can put bigger portions on the plate so you feel satisfied because the fiber has negative feedback loop on the appetite and the hypothalamus. So eggplant, mushrooms, cauliflower, tomatoes, onions, artichokes, zucchinis, other types of green vegetables, asparagus, broccoli, string beans, spaghetti squash, fruits like melons, berries, and citrus fruit, big salads, and raw vegetables like raw carrots and raw peas and raw beets. And all these things, of course, help people be satisfied with lower amounts of calories because they're taking that leader in the stomach and they're putting lots of nutrients in, lots of fiber without excess amounts of calories. So I'm saying, to review this again, don't forget, I'm saying that when you have that variety at lunch and dinner, which includes the green vegetable, the cooked vegetables, some bean and some nut and seed, because we strive for about a half an ounce of nuts or seeds with each meal for a person that's overweight. For a person that's not overweight or an athlete or somebody who requires more, they eat more calories and more nuts and seeds. I don't eat a half an ounce of nuts with each meal. I strive for like an ounce with each meal because I'm not trying to lose weight. I want to maintain my all the exercise I do, the extra calories I need. But in any case, I'm saying that, believe it or not, that the consumption of something of the small amount of nuts and seeds helps maintain satiety and is associated with being satisfied with less calories, not more calories, and helps reduce and reverse heart disease, stabilize the heart against arrhythmia, and reduce the desire to eat excessively. So you're taking some steps here to get rid of addiction. And one is you may feel worse when people switch from an unhealthy diet to a healthy diet. And without warning people that they're going to feel worse, they're never going to stay with the diet. They're going to feel worse in a few days and they're going to give up and go back to their old diet. So it's critically important that people understand they're going to feel worse and go into a detox mode when they start to eat healthier. And then it takes a while because after a few weeks, they're going to feel better after a week or so, but they're still not going to, they still have that desire in the brain because they've been used to so many concentrated calories and hyperpalatable food. They're not going to lose their addiction, they're just going to lose feeling bad. But they do this for months, maybe 2 or 3 months, and they're starting to be in touch with true hunger, and they're going to start to not really feel like they're going to be comfortable without overeating. They're going to be feeling like they're comfortable with the right amount of calories, and they don't have to feel like they have to eat more and more food, but they have to do that they have to repeat the proper practice for a period of time to get to that space where you're comfortable with it. It's always like we say that practice makes perfect with regard to being a sports or athlete, but only if you practice the right technique. Practice can ingrain bad habits. You have to practice the right stuff if you're going to have it become second nature and become just effortless and learn to prefer to eat this way. On the black belt, of course, when you do it a while, then you prefer to eat this way. You dislike salt and heavy spices. You feel ill after you eat unhealthy, and you feel best and you enjoy eating healthfully the most. All right, I'm finishing this up, and I do have a lot of personal satisfaction with my career helping people recover from obesity and food addiction. And so I have a retreat in San Diego that many of you know, where people who are unable to do this on their own or who need extra help can come and stay with me for a month or 2 or 3 or more even. And in doing so, it reduces the chance of recidivism. But whether you get help or you get motivation online or you get help in a group or you get your family to enlist yourself, it's that you want to set yourself up for success by having support in your local community and having a support system that encourages you to stay healthy, especially in the first phases when this becomes a little difficult. Okay, well, good luck to you all and look forward to your questions now.
Great. Dr. Fuhrman, thank you so much. That was terrific. I really enjoyed that, and I'm sure people in the audience did too. If you could just stop sharing your screen, that would be great. I'd like to introduce Peggy Krause. Peggy, do you want to turn on your video, please? Great. And Peggy's going to help facilitate the question and answers. I know there's quite a bit of activity in the Q&A. So
see, there's a huge chat box there,
Yeah.
What's that?
Very active.
Yeah, an active
Right.
chat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very active.
So there was a common thread about supplements and vitamins and nutrient deficiencies. People mentioned vitamin B12, omega-3s, and iodine. So if you could comment in general maybe, and just address those three specifically.
Okay. Well, the four nutrients that as a clinician that we see people benefit from or get in trouble with, or especially if they're eating healthfully, are zinc, EPA and DHA, B12, and usually not iodine so much, but iodine can be, people are used to having iodinated salt, but, seafoods and foods. So in other words, it probably pays to have some moderate exposure to iodine. The RDI is 150 micrograms a day. If you're not going to salt your food and eating plant foods, it's probably better to have some iodine exposure in the form of supplementation, or use a little bit of kelp. A tenth of a teaspoon of kelp has 150 micrograms of iodine in it. Too much iodine can suppress the thyroid too. So you can eat too much kelp. So we're talking about a tenth of a teaspoon having 150 micrograms. We don't want people to be pouring a tablespoon or a teaspoon of kelp on their food, because they could get hypothyroidism from exposure to too much iodine. So you only need a little bit of iodine is the point. But the major, because I'm unique as a physician, my uniqueness is that I've been involved with this plant-based movement for many, many decades as a physician. And the American Natural Hygiene Society, which then converted to the National Health Association, the American Vegan Society, and all these people who used to be my mentors, but became elderly and many of them developed neurologic problems in later life. And I measured their blood for omega-3 fatty acids, and they were exceedingly low. And there's been a growing amount of evidence that most standard American diet eaters can get dementia from the lack of antioxidants in fruits and vegetables, and because of atherosclerosis and poor circulation of brain, saturated fats all cause dementia. But for a person eating a whole food plant-based diet, why are these people getting dementia? And of course, it's omega-3 fatty acid deficiency is the major cause of dementia in healthy eaters, but it's not the major cause of dementia in unhealthy eaters. But as a whole here, that we're seeing that there is a very genetic amount of genetic variability between people's ability to convert the ALA from walnuts, flax seeds, green vegetables into EPA and DHA. It's a low amount of conversion percent, which varies from person to person. So some people can convert adequately, but most people don't convert into the ideal level on a plant-based diet. And most recent studies, not the ones in the last 5 years, but the last 3 years, have shown that we have more brain volume and more longevity when people get the omega-3 index above 5 or even above 6. So 5 years ago, I used to tell people they should supplement to get their omega-3 index above 4. But today I actually tell people to get their omega-3 index above 6, because we have more beneficial effects on maintaining brain volume. But it's not just taking those things once you develop disease or when you're elderly. You have to be having a high, adequate omega-3 index through many decades of life. Just like salt eating. You don't want to cut back on your salt intake when you develop disease. It's your lifetime exposure to salt that determines your risk. That's my objection to the American College of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, telling people to cut back on salt once they develop heart disease. If it's right for them to cut back on salt when they develop heart disease, then they shouldn't have had it through their childhood and adolescence and early life to develop heart disease to begin with. They should have cut back the whole life, not just for people who develop heart disease. That's like telling a person who develops lung cancer to quit smoking. If it's right for them not to smoke, they should just not smoke their whole life. So the same thing here with, we don't see, necessarily later life supplemental use once you develop shrinkage of the brain, the ability of the brain to grow back again. So it's critically important to have adequate B12 and adequate omega-3 index. It's not an expensive test, and you can adjust your algae-based supplement to the level to have an adequate level. Some people need more and some people need less. But zinc is also an element that has genetic variability. And zinc is also linked to immunosenescence, in other words, decreasing of immunity, increased risk of prostate cancer, breast cancer, and dementia and brain health in later life too. And zinc is, as people are aware, is not as available in plant foods as animal products, because there is zinc in plant foods, but it's bound by phytic acid, and it's not as absorbable from plants. So people on vegan diets generally are better to have a little higher zinc exposure. So having a low amount of zinc supplementation, 10, 15 milligrams a day I think is good protection for a person on a plant-based diet.
Great information. And this was a comment in the chat I thought was very interesting. Could you elaborate on flowers? So this particular person said that white and whole wheat flours, she understands not as good. What about other grains, whether other intact grains being ground to flour, as well as legume flour?
That's a good question because when you grind it into flour and make it into pasta, the resistance starch increases and the glycemic load goes down. So a bean or a soybean pasta or a chickpea pasta or something like that has a lower glycemic effect than even whole wheat pasta. And the pasta has lower glycemic effect than using it as bread. But it's the whole wheat pastry flour, because it's ground to a finer grind, that has more glycemic role than let's say, an intact whole grain or a sprouted whole grain bread. So I'm not against whole wheat. I'm not against wheat, but I like people to use the breads that are made from sprouted wheat that aren't ground to like a fine pastry flour. You find most of the studies, the anti-wheat studies and the anti-wheat books, if you look at the references of what they're showing the wheat consumption is linked to disease, it's always them using muffins and flours and white flour. They're not using intact grains and whole intact grains. It's the way the flour is processed, not the food itself. So I don't think you have to avoid all wheat, except if you're gluten sensitive. And that's not more than, I don't think one in more than 30, 40 people would have that condition, maybe 1 in 50 people. So most people who think they need to avoid wheat could probably have it if it was intact or not made so highly glycemic. So yes, I think that if you're going like some of the like Food for Life or Ezekiel breads are made with sprouted grains and they're not highly salted, that can be you can get an Ezekiel tortilla or an Ezekiel pita bread or something, you know what I mean? You can stuff with vegetables and mushrooms and sprouts and stuff and make something that's okay to eat. So I think you can have some of those whole grains, but it's the intact whole grain. And if you're using it in amounts as like a pasta base or a grain base, then you want to use the whole grain, like the whole quinoa, teff, amaranth, wheat berry cooked in water, you can grind it into a flour. You can put it on your bed and put your vegetables and peas and onions and mushrooms in with that, mix it with a Thai curry sauce or something and make it taste a good meal. So we're using the whole intact grain, not grinding into a flour. And then our pastas preferably are not made from high glycemic flours, but low glycemic flours like chickpea, lentil, soybean, and things like that. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Janet asks, how many days of healthful eating is average to improve depression?
Well, depression is complicated, and there are a lot of things we do. Healthful eating is important to improve depression. And we're talking about changing brain structure and function. And that could require, neural feedback and certain types of mindfulness exercises, but also excellent nutrition. And the excellent nutrition might be increased levels of omega-3 fatty acids, particularly high amounts of EPA that penetrate the brain quicker than DHA does. Because it takes months to change the brain structure with fatty acid supplements that could have led to depression. So we're talking here, zinc is helpful, chlorella tablets are helpful, higher dose of omega-3 is helpful. And especially taking supplements like 5-hydroxytryptophan, saffron, and SAMe are helpful for people with depression. And combining, we have a whole protocol on my, I have a whole protocol of the supplements I give people that are prone to depression, because I don't want to use antidepressant drugs as a first-line agent for depression, because they could lead to dependency on serotonin uptake inhibiting, which could make you more dependent on them and more depressed when you take them away. So it's better to do it nutritionally, give all the nutritional factors, but people are different. Sometimes people need a little individual adjustment of that. So I do give people that type of advice at my website, at drfuhrman.com. I give people advice and maybe have them get certain blood work and see what they're doing and giving a more holistic approach for their depression. But it doesn't reverse, it takes time. You have to take care of your health for months to really have long-term beneficial effects. But good question.
Charlotte and Bill are fans of yours. They want to know, is the information shared today in one of your books?
It's in many of my books. My most recent book is called Eat for Life, which has the most updated references. But the book that talks most about the dangers of fast food and food addiction is called Fast Food Genocide. So this lecture is mostly from the book Fast Food Genocide, but keeping in mind Eat for Life has the most updated, is the most recently written book of the most updated references.
And getting back to bread, is sourdough bread a good source of fermented food? Or does it fit in with the white flour category? Does sourdough bread have any value?
Not really. I mean, there might be some value, but it's not a recommended food. You look at the ingredients of the bread you're eating, and if they say wheat flour, that's not good enough. It has to say whole wheat flour, and it's preferably if it's intact or sprouted wheat flour. So you really have to read the ingredients. Look at the sodium content. Look at it and make sure that wheat flour is not an ingredient at all. Because if it's the second ingredient, that means half the bread is white flour, right? Even if it's the second ingredient. If it looks like whole wheat, it could say whole wheat bread right on it. You still got to look at the ingredients and make sure it says whole wheat flour, or another type of flour that can be helpful, like these multiple sprouted grains that have like lentil flour and amaranth flour and soybeans and seeds. And it's better to have a mixture of other types of foods and have more intact grains. They should give me what's the word of an advertiser's fee for advertising the Food for Life Ezekiel bread, which has those mixed grains. You know, I don't have any association with that company. I don't make any money on those breads.
One more topic, Dr. Barnett. There were a few questions about intermittent fasting and combining that with a nutritarian diet to maximize benefits. What are your thoughts, Dr. Fuhrman?
My thoughts are that, and my experience of the last 30 years, more than 30 years dealing with obese people, is that when they cut calories back too low to intermittent fasting days of 500 calories a day, it leads to more food obsession and more high chance of recidivism and less chance of consistency with the diet. So I think that the type of intermittent fasting that we're utilizing is time-restricted eating, is going an earlier dinner and going to bed and sleep. But when you have those days where you go to 500 calorie days and back to 1200 calorie days and then to 600 calorie days, it actually enhances the risk of failure. It doesn't increase the risk of success. I've found that consistency and repetition, and let's say a person is eating 1400 calories a day, day in, day out. Well, if they're not losing weight, they can cut back to 1300 until they find the spot where they're losing weight and still eating enough bulk of calories. They're losing weight steadily every single week. But they're not cutting back to 500 or 800 or 1,000 because they're not overly cutting back, because that leads to more obsession about food and more yo-yoing their weight. And it leads to this cycle of dieting and binging that I don't recommend. So fasting I could use as a therapeutic tool with people with lupus or with the asthma to get them off their steroids and things, but I don't utilize it with people who have food addiction. I'd rather have them develop consistency in their behaviors and repeat the right patterns of behavior.
Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman. Always a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. Now we hear a lot of confusion around people call it intermittent fasting, but they really mean time restricted eating, or sometimes they really do mean intermittent fasting. So I wonder if you could just clarify that, Dr. Fuhrman, what the differences are there, and because you did recommend time restricted eating just now.
That's correct. It's a form of intermittent fasting, but because every night you're fasting, but you're not really fasting if you're eating a late heavy dinner because you're digesting half the night. So we want you to fast when you're sleeping, which means we want you to eat. So I don't really want people to skip breakfast either. I want them to stack their calories early in the day and if you want to skip a meal or eat a light meal, make that dinner your light meal. You enhance longevity when you go to sleep on an empty stomach. So I do advocate time restricted eating, and eating just means making sure you eat dinner early, not late, which is different from European, where people eat dinner at 9 o'clock at night or something. So we want people to eat dinner maybe like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, or eat it, if possible, finish eating. And if you have to eat later, then make it a very light dinner. If you can't get back from work and you can't eat, and you have to eat something later, then make it very light, very like just a salad or a piece of fruit. Do not eat heavy meals at bedtime. And that's the form of time-restricted eating we recommend. Intermittent fasting generally refers to changing the amount of calories you eat from day to day, where one day you'll eat 600 calories and the next day you'll eat 1,200 or 1,400, and you go back to 600 again, or you do 2 days of 600 and 3 days of 1,600. And that's intermittent fasting, which can control people's weight and improve their diabetes and have beneficial effects. But the chance of recidivism, of yo-yoing their weight, it leads to less chance of sustainability and long-term benefits in my experience. So I do not recommend that for people who have trouble with controlling the amount of food they're eating.
Right. I think we have time for one more question. If you could, go ahead, Peggy.
Question, absolutely. Let's go back to the beginning. Thoughts on coconut milk used in cooking. do they affect the body like other oils?
I don't really mind it if they use it a little bit to make like a Thai curry sauce or something. I'm not drinking it down or using it all over their cereal. I'm using large amounts. I see coconut and coconut milk, coconut flakes or coconut milk more as like something you would add to a dessert or a recipe that in small amounts. And if your diet is otherwise healthy, that little bit of the coconut just to enhance the flavor of a Thai curry sauce, or to make it into a special occasion ice cream with bananas and little coconut flakes. But I usually make my ice cream from bananas and walnuts, or bananas and macadamia nuts, which are less saturated fat, than coconut, or bananas and walnuts are probably healthier, and real vanilla bean powder. And a little bit of plant milk makes it fantastic whipped up banana ice cream, for example. So you really, I'm not so against it, but I don't really need to use it much because there's other ways of getting the same, of skinning the cat with better, healthier fats.
Very good. One last one, Dr. Barnett.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on amla powder?
I think amla powder is a healthy thing to consume, but I don't think it's a necessary thing to consume. There are lots of healthy things, and I think that many herbs and spices, particularly like rosemary, what's that Simon and Garfunkel song? Parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, right? And all these herbs, tarragon and caraway seeds, and all these things are very healthy for you, to have a wide variety of natural herbs and seeds and that like that. So yes, so those things are pretty good for you. And there's a lot of healthy things you could consume like that in your diet that add flavor to foods. We make like a shake. We make like a dukkha, where we toast lightly some sesame seeds and hazelnuts. We mix it with like lightly toasted tarragon and caraway seeds, and we put the herbs and spices in, like the thyme and the dill and the oregano. And we make like a little sprinkle. You could sprinkle on your green vegetables for flavor, but the sprinkle itself is good for you because you put a lot of those healthy herbs and spices in there, but not super hot. They're just flavorful spices, flavorful herbs.
Perfect.
All right, fantastic, great. So first of all, I'd like to ask our engineer to turn on his video so he can take a bow. This would not be possible without the amazing talents and skills of Bob Franke, our communications director, and who's been hiding behind the blue globe. There he is. Take a bow. And Peggy, thank you so much for helping us with the Q&A. You did a very skillful job of that. And Dr. Fuhrman, especially, we're so great to see you again and to have you on our program. And this was just fantastic. And for people who didn't register on the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute website, if you got this through the Chef AJ package, there's a link for you to click on it. You can you'll get it, and we'll you give your email, and we'll send you a copy of this video when it's ready in a few days. So again, thank you all, and Dr. Fuhrman, it was great to see you, and good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.